Hi, and thanks for joining us. I'm CJ Rosenstein, and welcome to Courier TV News Election Coverage 2023. The polls are now closed. We preview the races that everyone is talking about in DuPage County. But before that, let's talk about Trump. Joining me now to discuss this breaking news and election results is Adjunct Professor in Political Science Department, Bill Enright. Welcome, Bill.
Thank you, CJ.
Earlier today, former President Trump has pleaded not guilty to 34 charges, including falsifying business records. Can you explain what happened today in New York?
Yeah, sure. And so basically he's been indicted, which means that the grand jury saw the evidence that was presented by the district attorney, and the grand jury decided that there was enough evidence to charge him or to proceed with charging him with these crimes. But in actuality, when you take a look at a grand jury, it's really being run by the district attorney, and they only see the evidence that the district attorney wants them to see, and they only are able to ask questions of the district attorney. So oftentimes, like, a grand jury is going to rubber stamp some of these things. But in any case, it's still 34 counts against Trump, which is now going to go to trial.
And how long does a trial like this typically last?
Yeah, I would suspect that Donald Trump's lawyers are going to drag this out a long time. There's a long discovery. The lawyers are going to get a chance to interview everybody who's already been interviewed, take a look at all the evidence, and then probably ask for several continuances of the court. So there's going to be probably quite some time. Certainly it's going to go months, and maybe it'll go years.
Wow. And Trump doesn't have the greatest reputation in New York. Do you think that would play a factor into the trial at all?
Yeah, good question. You know, when you're taking a look at like a change of venue, something like that, it's usually hard to get a change of venue, especially because, of course, there's a huge population in New York, and there's going to be people who are going to be certainly supporters of Trump in New York, just like there would be anyplace else. And so to have something like that is probably going to be difficult to get them to change the venue. And of course, you've got 8 million people to choose from. And of course, when you do become a juror, you're going to swear that you're going to listen to the evidence and base your vote on the evidence.
Do you think he'd be found guilty?
Yeah, you know, at this point, I'm just not sure. I think that he's going to have like some really good attorneys, and that they're going to really, you know, paint a case for Trump, and that he's been basically victimized by the state's attorney. So I think it's going to be an interesting trial.
And with the elections coming up, we'll see if that plays a factor in him running in 2024.
Yeah, right. And certainly it seems like full steam ahead for running. And I know that he's going to be talking tonight and see like what he has to say once he finishes talking. And maybe he's going to, you know, point out some things that are inconsistencies. I'm not exactly sure what he's going to say.
All right. We're going to discuss more on Trump at our 10 p.m. show after he gives us his press conference at Mar-a-Lago. And it's been a hard-fought race for who will be the next mayor of Chicago. What are your thoughts on the race in Chicago?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because, of course, first they had basically a primary. If you didn't get 50% of the vote, then it's going to go to the top two vote getters, which were Paul Vallas and Brandon Johnson. And so now it's a African American against a white, and to see whether or not that's going to play out along racial lines. And the thing that's sort of interesting is the Hispanics are really going to be the swing vote in this. And so which way are the Hispanics going to vote? Are they going to go with Brandon Johnson, or are they going to go with Paul Vallas? And of course, we've seen like a lot of endorsements coming from different elected officials, and seeing like how it all plays out. And I think it's going to be very, very close.
So with it being close, what's at stake for Chicago with this election?
Yeah, good question. And so for sure, some of the big differences are, it sounds like Brandon Johnson's interested in introducing some sort of a income tax for Chicago. And an income tax for Chicago, I assume, would be similar to like a New York income tax, where if you work in the city of Chicago, you're taxed. Even though you live somewhere else, they're going to tax your income just for working in Chicago. So you take the train in from Naperville and you work in Chicago, you're probably going to get a tax from that income tax. And so that would be like one of the things that's like the biggest thing. And then also, how are they going to fight crime? What are they going to do about the rising crime rates? And Brandon Johnson has an idea of maybe bringing in more social worker type of people to help with crime. And and Paul Vallis has an idea of bringing in more police officers.
So how will the winner deal with the city council if once one of them
Yeah,
is elected?
right. And so it'll probably be a divided city council, and you can imagine that it's going to be difficult for whichever side that you're on, dealing with whether it's African Americans, whites, or Hispanics, and trying to get some sort of a coalition there. So I can imagine that could be difficult too.
And now let's move closer to home. What are your thoughts on the Naperville mayor election?
Yeah, that's been an interesting one too. And again, an African American and a white who are leading in the polls, with Benny White and then also Scott Worley. And then there's Tiffany Stevens also in the race, the third candidate, who we haven't heard much from her in actuality. And so it sounded like she sort of like took a back seat, but her name's still on the ballot, so she could certainly influence what's happening in the race.
And with the two front runners, Benny White and Scott Worley, what makes each of them unique?
Yeah, well, it's kind of interesting again because I wouldn't say that they have exactly similar backgrounds, but a little bit similar backgrounds, where Scott Worley was a police officer, Benny White was a career military, and so they are both talking about how they're going to be tough on crime, what they can do about economic growth in the town. And then one thing that's certainly been coming up and has been going on for quite some time is what are they going to do about affordable housing in Naperville? And so there's been a lot of proposals floating around and trying to figure out how they can come up with more affordable housing, because you certainly have really expensive housing in Naperville, and how do you balance that out?
What do you think the outcome of the race will be?
Another one that's going to be really close. Not exactly sure at this point, but I'm certain that it's going to be a close one, just like the city of Chicago mayor's race is going to be close.
Wow, so we got close races going all around in the state of Illinois right now.
Sure do.
All right. And finally, let's talk about the College of DuPage Board of Trustee race. What can you tell us all about that?
Yeah, 3 candidates running for 2 seats, and we've got an incumbent running for one of the seats. And so when you have an incumbent, most likely you're going to have somebody who's going to have a little bit of a head start on the other candidates, but also, no polling or anything like that has been done on this race. So not exactly sure like what direction that it's going, but it certainly probably could end up being close just like the rest of them can.
What are some of the big challenges facing College of DuPage with this?
Yeah, well, one of the big ones is they've got a bargaining coming up with the full-time faculty, and they're going to be deciding like whether or not they're going to give the full-time faculty a larger raise or more benefits, and certainly the full-time faculty is going to be fighting for everything that they can get out of the school. And so that's probably going to be the biggest issue facing the board.
And Bill, you certainly know a lot about political elections and especially our local elections. Is there anything else you'd like to add tonight on any of these?
So one of the other ones that I thought was kind of interesting was the referendum that's taking place in Orland Park to decide whether or not they're going to get rid of the city manager and have the mayor do everything, which would be kind of interesting because it's difficult for a mayor to do everything when you're talking about dealing with things like unions or dealing with public works. And so that's going to be sort of one of the interesting ones. And it's Keith Pacow, who's the mayor there and is like fighting for this to eliminate the city manager there, which of course would save some money. But he's the one who was also like in arguments over COVID restrictions with with Governor Pritzker. And so those have been sort of interesting. And then the other one that I was just sort of looking at was the referendum in Roselle to build a new library. It's a $22 million library, and because Roselle Library doesn't have home rule, then they have to go to the people and ask them for approval to create a bond and pay for the bond with a new tax revenue source.
Wow, $22 million library. That is pretty insane.
Yeah, right.
Well, thank you, Bill, for coming on and talking to us about all these elections and everything going on tonight. This has been your election update. Thank you for choosing Courier TV News for your election coverage this evening. Again, we'll be back at 10 p.m. with more updates, including candidate reactions and analysis. We will have live reactions to the local elections on our Facebook page and Instagram at Courier TV. We now leave you with a segment we call Chap Chat. We ask COD students who they think will be the next Chicago mayor.
Did you vote?
No, I did not.
And why?
I did not know that the election was happening.
Who do you think will become the red mayor of Chicago?
Paul Vallis.
Thank you. So the first question, did you vote and why?
No, I didn't vote because I just chose not to vote.
And the second question, who do you think will become the red mayor of Chicago?
Paul Vallis.
Thank you very much. Did you vote and why?
No, I didn't vote. It's not really my thing.
Who do you think will become the red mayor of Chicago?
Paul Vallis.
Thank you very much.
Mhm.